I think there's a constant tension in life between relaxation, contentment, mindfulness, being where you are in the present moment, and ambition, drive, potential. I think that with most humans, they have this daily tension within them of how far we lean one way or the other. And I often think that when we grow up, we have this blueprint for where we place our identity on the spectrum. Some people are very happy with doing very little, sitting around and lazing around. Other people feel they constantly had to have something that they're ticking off their to-do list to feel like they're okay. So I think that there will always be a tension to a point of feeling like, have I got enough done today? And I think it's a very common thing with high performers, right? People feeling like they need to do what needs to be done to make them feel like they can say, I've done enough. I can rest. I deserve this. So I think that that's one thing that people wouldn't see from the outside. And it's something that I've got a bunch of tools now that I feel like I can tick off, know that in a time where I'm with friends and family, I'll be like, yeah, I've done what I had to do. Let me leave that, all of the unfinished things that I will need to do at some point, put it to the side and be able to be with friends and family.
Where do you think you fit on that spectrum of need to do a lot of stuff in order to feel good, or don't really need to do very much and just very happy to cruise and be? Where do you think you fit?
My identity, I would say, or my baseline is more relaxed, not doing that much, funnily enough. It's this feeling of, I want to achieve something which bubbles up and then I follow it for a while. But I'd say that if I can have a holiday where I can just let go, it's quite easy for me to finally drop it.
Then what caused the change, or what caused the shift to, I mean, by all accounts, from the outside looking in, most people would consider you a pretty high performer in that you do quite a lot of stuff. How did that happen?
How did it happen for me wanting to drive? I think it was growing up and having a pretty happy and easy childhood, and having a chip on my shoulder with being like, I don't know if I've proven myself.
Interesting.
Yeah, like I feel like I've been blessed that I had a wonderful family growing up, and not super wealthy, but we never had to worry about food on the table. I didn't have any major trauma in my childhood, which I know is something that a lot of people have hanging over them. So I was very lucky in that regard. And I just felt like, well, I got to put myself to the test. If you're going to play the human game, you want to play it on hard mode. I've always thought that. I've always thought, like, give me a challenge so I can rise to it, rather than just let me be an unmotivated blob.
Do you think that's important for human beings, to have a challenge that we can rise to?
For sure. I think we meet the best version of ourselves when we have to rise to something which we feel exceeds who we are.
And do you think, was that answer purely from how we're made up biologically, that we need that to feel better, or are you talking about something else here?
I mean, resistance in general works for life. If we look at longevity, for example, which is the hot topic, if you feed someone or something, a biological process, a cell, anything in the spectrum of life, a third less than it wants, it usually lives a third longer. If you create a strength stimulus by having to push past a resistance that someone can only just about handle, they get stronger. If you put someone in a situation where they're very cold or very warm for a period of time, there are biological mechanisms that get put into place so that we become healthier.
Yeah, so, the hormetic stress thing is everywhere, right? It helps us become the best versions of ourselves as well.
Yeah.
That's an interesting
So
lens.
resistance is so important, and particularly in a day and an age where there isn't that many challenges in terms of food or shelter. We have to meet them on our own terms. And this is something I see at clinic, that often people who withdraw from the world, who feel like, it's all a bit too much, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It really does become too much. Their ability to be able to tolerate stimuli around them, it means that we saw this during COVID, for example.
Tell me, yeah.
We had so many people going inwards and not leaving the house, and suddenly going out down to the shops or to meet a friend became something which was very stressful. So their ability to cope with something that before was just day-to-day normal, activities, that window of tolerance ended up shrinking to a point that doing something small became overwhelming. And in many ways, if we don't meet resistance head on, we will find we live a much more challenging life.
And do you feel like you've taken on the right amount of resistance?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How do you go about calculating that? Is it a let's go by feel day-to-day thing, or is it better to constantly keep yourself under a certain amount of pressure so you can cook in the pressure and become a better version? Or how do you approach that?
Well, if we look at it from a neuroscience perspective, we know that if you're constantly in that state of fight or flight, you're not going to be able to adapt and recover. Resistance isn't the only variable we need in play to improve. You need to have something which is challenging and then a period of time to be able to adapt afterwards. So just, drive is actually a terrible, blueprint for health. And in fact, some of the most unhealthy people that I treat are often incredibly successful because they haven't quite worked out that balance. And they'll find that they'll drive. And we've all heard these stories of people who have heart attacks at 50 or, end up having a mental breakdown at some point in their life. And it wasn't that they were not successful, that they weren't able to go out and achieve the necessary things that society have put up in front of them, but they never had the time to back off again and to adapt. There's that point of regulation that we need. So in neuroscience, we see that a lot. But in terms of finding it in a personal scale, you have to listen. You have to have awareness. You have to have this thing called interoception, your ability to sense your own internal state. So to listen to how you're feeling that day and make a decision of, do I need to push? Do I feel like I'm at a 7 out of 10 and I actually can really drive and meet the resistance head on? Or actually, do I need to have that regulation phase, that time out, so I can adapt from what happened yesterday?
And do you feel like that's enough structure for most people? Like when you talk about this stuff with your patients, I'm sure you see a lot of patients who, one of the key issues is they're just not slowing down. Do you think it's enough, or in your experience, has it been enough to just offer them that idea of interoception and a scale of 1 to 10, and based off of that, we choose something else to regulate if that's what you need? Or do you feel like the conversation has to go deeper than that?
It has to go deeper than that. Yeah, it has to go deeper than that. For a few people, you may find that is enough, the idea, the conceptual idea. But for most, to be able to truly listen is something which is atrophied in our modern day. We use our wearables, we look outward for external validation. It's very rare and almost sometimes the most difficult thing to listen inwards.
Yeah, it's a strange thing that's happened in our world. We're looking everywhere else outside of us to get information on how well we're doing inside. Instead of just talking to ourselves.
Yeah.